Great. Yeah, if you can, please sit at the front. Yeah, please, plenty of seats at the front. Grab a seat. Don't be shy. Good, good, good. I know. It's recorded as well, so yeah, great. Please grab a seat. Oh, we've got a straggler here. Welcome, come in, grab a seat. Great, good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to see everyone here today. It's been a while since we've done an offline event, and it's so good to see people in the flesh at last. This is the latest in the series of our embassy outreach events organized by the Rbcc, in which the embassy team provide the business community with an update and then gives everyone an opportunity to ask any question they may have. For those who I don't know, I know most of you, but my name's Alf Torrance. I'm the Executive Director of the Rbcc, and I'd like to thank the British Ambassador, Her Excellency Deborah Bronnett, Trevor Lewis, Head of DIT in Russia, and Sarah Pilbeam, Consul General, who looks after the most important thing, visas. So, and we'll hear from them all in a few minutes. Yeah, amongst other things. Thank you, of course, to all Rbcc members and friends joining us today. And of course, we have an online audience as well, so a very warm welcome. These outreach events started at the outbreak of the coronavirus almost 2 years ago. I know, terrible. And I think this is probably this is the 7th we've done with the embassy. And I'd just like to thank the embassy team again, because the feedback we get is hugely appreciated, and it's a great opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth what's actually happening. Today is actually unique because we will be doing, for the first time, the hybrid format. So it's a little bit of experimentation. We are slightly constrained by the IT setup. So the way it's going to work is, once I finish my opening comments, I will invite the ambassador, then Trevor, then Sarah to come up and make some opening remarks. We'll then have plenty of time for Q&A, but again, to stop them constantly yo-yoing backwards and forwards, I'll ask each to come up consecutively, and then if you have questions for each of them, if you'd ask them at that time. I'm sure they won't mind if you've got sort of supplementary questions once they've sat down coming back, but we'll try and organize it that way. Again, the acoustics we haven't quite worked out. I will ask people at the lectern to repeat the question from the audience so that the online audience can actually hear those questions. We've got an hour for Q&A and the update, so plenty of time to get into some of the detail. And then once we've finished, I hope you'll stay with us, because we'll move next door, down the corridor, where there'll be drinks and there'll be a chance to catch up with old friends and hopefully to make a few new acquaintances. DIT, Trevor Lewis, is very kindly providing the drinks and food. So thank you very much to Trevor. And I think that's worth a round of applause. Ambassador, very many thanks for taking the opportunity to speak to us. As I said, this is the 7th time we've organized such an event, and it's hugely appreciated. We have plenty to talk about. On the political side, I know there's a lot of anxiety about the Ukraine. At 6 o'clock today, Presidents Biden and Putin are speaking, hopefully to take some of the tension out of that situation. But of course, if it worsens, it will have a huge impact, or potentially a huge impact on business. So I'm sure that will be on people's minds. As I said, this is the 7th event. The reason we're doing it, because we were thinking we're making progress against coronavirus. And then, of course, the Omicron variant is with us now. So, you know, especially in the run up to Christmas, I know there'll be a lot of anxiety, especially this is the Russo-British business community, with people wanting to go back to the UK, etc. And any insights you have on that would be greatly appreciated. As I say to my son, bring me my crystal ball. I know you don't have one, but anyways, I know you'll have some informed comment on that. Much beside that, but I think that's the starter for 10. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Alf, and it's great to see you. Well, see all of you. So great. So welcome everyone on the screen. But I have to say, it is really nice to have people actually in the room. As Alf says, we are actually relearning how to do this because we've had 2 years where we haven't done many in-person events, and now we're learning how to do hybrid events. So I am promised that our IT will all be upgraded at the end of the year, so it will be even better, hopefully, when we come to the 8th outreach event. But anyway, it's great to see you. As Alf says, I'm planning to say a little bit about COVID. I kind of hoped, a year ago that maybe we'd be beyond that, but I think we're learning that it will be over by Christmas, but we just don't know which one. And a little bit about bilateral politics and Ukraine, and then maybe, if I may, end on perhaps a more optimistic note about COP26 and climate and the work that we're doing with Russia in that area. And then I think Trevor is going to cover the sort of economic trade issues, and then I think Sarah is here to answer any questions, but isn't planning to say any questions about British nationals and so on for us. Just on COVID, yes, we are all very worried about Omicron, and in the UK, we've identified it as an issue of serious concern, which is why we have tightened up some of our border restrictions, which is why we've reintroduced the red list for a range of countries, primarily in Southern Africa, but not only, in a way that I know is deeply unpopular with many those countries, but also many of us who travel, and indeed many of our colleagues who live in that part of the world. And but it is because we are taking action to try and slow the spread of this, what seems to be a very highly infectious variant, to give us time to really both understand more about it, but also get our vaccination rates even higher. In the UK, we are fortunate in that I think we're about 90% of our over 12s have now had at least one vaccination shot, and about more than 80% of our over 12s have had both, and with 35% have now had a booster as well. So we've got very high vaccination rates, particularly amongst the older population who are more vulnerable. And that is having an impact, thankfully, both on infection levels, but also on particularly on hospitalizations and deaths. So there's some positive signs from the UK. Of course, we're concerned about what's happening in Russia. We're concerned about infection rates. It's good to see vaccination rates going up here, but they're still relatively low. So please, if you're not vaccinated, please do get vaccinated. It's very concerning to see what's happening with the death rate here. So I cannot tell you what the Russian government will do in terms of COVID. We do obviously talk to them a lot. We are talking to them about what we are doing, and we are trying to keep our borders open, although with extra testing and some other requirements. And so far, the Russian government is doing that too, at least as regards the UK. One thing I know, because we are being lobbied by the Business Association, one issue that is very live here is recognition of Sputnik V for travel purposes. Our policy in the UK is that we have decided to recognise for travel purposes any vaccine the WHO, the World Health Organization, has agreed to provide emergency listing for. So we recognise quite a lot of the Chinese vaccines, many of the other vaccines. Sputnik V has not yet achieved WHO listing. We are obviously encouraging both sides to get on with that, because I think all of us want to facilitate travel, but we also all want to stay safe. Moving on to maybe bilateral and Ukraine, some of you will have noticed that we have, despite the pandemic, managed to increase the bilateral contacts and conversations that we are having. They are pretty robust, and I am not going to pretend that the bilateral relationship between the UK and Russia is anything other than complicated and difficult, because it is complicated and difficult. But I think we are talking to one another more, and we are finding areas and issues on which we can work together. And that's some of the obvious ones: Afghanistan, Iran, and climate. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. We are very concerned about what's happening around the borders on the Ukrainian border. there's a conversation, as Alpha's mentioned tonight, between President Biden and President Putin. We have said clearly and directly to the Russian government that there would be incredibly serious consequences if Russia undertakes military action against Ukraine. That would be very serious, regardless of the international response. It would be catastrophic, I think, for both Russia and Ukraine. But there would also be a very strong international response. We are doing what we can to ensure that, you know, a diplomatic route is taken, and there's a lot of activity around that at the moment. So I'm sorry that that's not a very Christmassy message, but I think it is an important one, and it is one that, for me personally, as ambassador to Russia, it's one that I'm spending most time on at the moment. What I would really like to be spending even more time on, I have to say, is climate change, because obviously in a strategic level, we all have one planet, and that planet is under threat because of the way that we've been running our economies. But we did manage to bring the world together in Glasgow for COP26, and we actually managed to achieve a really fantastic outcome, although it's clearly not enough, and we will clearly need to do more. And one of the things that we have been able to work very productively with the Russian authorities is both preparations for Glasgow and also the negotiations in Glasgow themselves. And you will be aware that Russia signed up to the Glasgow Declaration, the Climate Pact, and also signed up to the Declaration on Forest and Land Use, which was, I think, very important given the size of Russian forests. But Russia has, some people know, about 20% of the world's forests, so a massive contribution to make. We also managed at Paris to agree some of the detailed rules of what's called the Paris Rule Book. That should create the framework for business, for governments to work together in achieving and fulfilling their commitments. And we are now talking to Russia about how we work together to take that forward. So we in the UK have some very serious commitments. Russia signed up to carbon neutrality by 2060 and are starting to come forward with some of their detailed plans. That's a good story politically. I think it's also a good business story because it opens up the scope for quite a lot of collaboration, quite a lot of joint working and opportunities for business as well. So as I say, although I'm afraid at the moment, most of my time is taken up with worrying about Ukraine and trying to find diplomatic solutions to that and reduce tensions, I am very much hoping that 2022 will be much more about working together on climate, because we have one planet and we all need to take action together to live in better balance with the planet. I think I'm going to finish on that note and hand seamlessly over to Trevor, who will no doubt also raise our spirits and talk about all the things that could happen, provided diplomacy prevails.
Indeed, indeed. And that's one of the main issues, really. I was speaking to colleagues back in London and in the north of England earlier on today on an online call, and the one message I was trying to get across to them is that Russia is a good market for British companies. Those of you who live and work here will know that. Where it's very, very difficult, and one of the biggest challenges we have, I think, within Department for International Trade is attracting new to market companies to look at Russia. So I think if all you do is watch the British news and all you hear is bad news, Ukraine and so on and so forth, then Russia's not going to be top of your list of markets to look at. But we are trying to change that and do our best. And we had an encouraging, so in my first 18 months here, we had no ministerial contact at all with DIT ministers. And that was really quite difficult. In the last year, things have picked up quite a lot. So I've spoken directly to 3 DIT ministers, all interested in Russia, some who even talking about potentially coming on visit, which is great. Alf will remember we managed to get Graham Stewart, the exports minister. Some of you may have been on the call. He came along and spoke on one of our events, which was great. It was the first ministerial presence I think we've had on sort of Rbcc meetings for quite some while. Unfortunately, Graham Stewart then got moved in the reshuffle, so we've got a new minister, Minister Priya, but we have got a commitment from him to meet the Russian ambassador in London in the new year to talk specifically on trade. So that's there. And then just on that, just to be interested to know, given that a lot of you got, obviously very major business interests in Russia, is where you think Russia would be in terms of the UK's trading partners. And have a little bit of interactive support from the crowd here. Anyone got any rough ideas where Russia might be? You might do. Yeah. Top 10, top 20, top 30? No, it's interesting. Well, this is, and the reason I mention this is because this is partly of the conversation I've had with the ministers. Would you think our exports to Russia are bigger than they are to Brazil? Anyone? Yeah. Did you think they would be bigger than they are to Mexico? South Africa? Yeah, good. Oh, you've been reading the trade stats, so that's good. Yeah. No, and the reason I use those. The reason I mention those specific markets, particularly if you're doing trade work back in the UK, is, and if you look there, you'll see lots of events around Brazil and Mexico and South Africa. And apart from what we do with Rbcc and some stuff that we do ourselves, there's not quite so much around Russia. And I think so when I've told ministers that, because they again internally hear a lot about these markets, and then they're actually quite surprised to see what a big market Russia is. So the latest, I've actually just got the latest statistics come in. So these were down, but this is all COVID related. So exports, this is up to the second quarter of 2021, were £4.2 billion. Prior to this, back in 2019, we were very close to £6 billion worth of exports to Russia. That's obviously tailed off very much with COVID, but was still quite significant. And just to answer my own question, Russia is our 20th largest trading partner. Unfortunately for us, most of that is going in the opposite direction. So about 1/3 of that is UK exports to Russia, 2/3 roughly Russian exports to the UK. It's our 26th largest export market, and it only accounts for 0.7% of UK exports, and our 17th largest import market, so Russian exports to the UK, 1.7% of the UK's total there. And our share, and these are separate figures, those are from our National Statistics Office, separate figures from the OECD, or from UNTAD in this case, sorry. So the total UK market share in Russia was 1.8% of goods in 2020. The UK market share in Russia was 1.2% for goods only, and 3.7% for services only. And I mentioned services only, we did some work, in this case with PwC, they did some research for us, and their estimate on the services sector was that the UK was potentially missing out on about £1.4 billion worth of services business in Russia. So there's a gap there that we need to plug. So I say it's 3.7% of the Russian market. Typically around the world, in most of our markets, UK services sector is about 7 or 8% of the markets, so much stronger in most of those places. So there's a gap in Russia that we need to plug. And again, these are the figures that come from there. So in 2019, there were around 3,900 UK VAT registered businesses that were doing business in Russia. So it's quite a lot. I don't think we see all 3,900 of them, but we do see quite a few of them. So that's quite a lot of stuff there that was, potential for companies to do more. And in terms of more, so again, I wouldn't expect many of you here would know the detail, but we did launch earlier the month a new export strategy. So this is with the government. I think they've been working on the export strategy for a number of months anyway. And then there's a new international trade secretary now, so I'm sure they just held back so that she had her chance to put her imprint on there. But it's going to be a big push on there. And amongst things that are going to be launched, and most of these would be more relevant, again, particularly for people who are online, but more relevant in the UK, is going to be an export support service. So this is going to be rolled out into Europe first, so basically hand-holding some companies and giving them more support. And it's going to go to Europe first, but it will be rolled out to more markets. And there's a pilot UK trade show program, and that is quite interesting because typically over many, many years, we always used to spend a lot of money on trade fairs and trade shows. And one of the complaints I often get from British companies, particularly compared to, they will reference Germany in particular, sometimes Switzerland, Italy, is that when you go to some of the trade shows, that a lot of these countries have this big national stand, lots of flags waving and bands and all sorts of stuff, and that the UK presence is typically quite small in comparison. So I'm interested that that's going to be rolled out. There's a lot more detail that we need on that, but I've always been very supportive of that. Also the trade missions, again, we haven't had trade missions here for many months really, but typically you would expect to get trade missions from different parts of the UK to come out to a big market like Russia to see what's there, typically from specific reasons. They're either sector specific or they come from the northwest of England or Birmingham Chamber of Commerce or whatever. So I hope that we might get some interest there. As I was mentioning, I was speaking to colleagues in the north today and they said that they have actually got some support for that. So I'm going to work with them to see if we can get some companies to come out. And the reason, and the point I made there to them, and I've seen this several times now since I've been here, is particularly new to market companies who've not been to Russia before. When they actually come here, they're very impressed, and certainly into Moscow and St. Petersburg, and I'm sure into some of the other cities, it's very much the wow factor, and they come away going, wow, it's not what we expected. It's very different from what we've been led to believe. So that's good. There's going to be an export academy, so more support, more training for companies who want that level of support, so they can get that, and more support from UK Export Finance. We do have a facility for Russia. There's an existing facility for Russia, so companies who want to look for UK Export Finance can do so. So by all means, anyone who's interested in that, please come to me and we'll see what we can do to help. And then, so just a couple of the strap lines, which it'd be great if you can remember these. So made in the UK, it's sold to the world, is the new export strategy. So that's that one. And then the other one that's under that is Race to a Trillion, trying to get sort of exports by the 2030s up to £1 trillion for UK companies, which is about, I think, 3 times where we are at the moment. So that's going to be a big push. And clearly, from my point of view, I'd like to see a lot of that happening in Russia, either here with you and companies here, or indeed with colleagues back in the UK. So that's probably enough from me, Alf. So I think Sarah was going to speak, or... Okay, Alf, I should exit stage left.
Great. Well, thank you very much. As I said, what we'll do now is we'll invite the ambassador back up to the lectern, and then if you've got any questions for her particularly, we'll try and ask them now, and then we'll get Trevor on afterwards. I appreciate you. It might not work out, but we'll give it a go. Okay. And we have some questions online, which I'll field once the questions from the audience have dried up. But okay, thanks.
Okay. And Alpha, are you happy for? We'll just.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just stand up. Ask the question.
Oh, I have to repeat it.
I'm Nathan Hunt, president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And the answer to my question, I assume, is no, shut up, next question. Many European countries have seen fit to recognize the Sputnik vaccine, in spite of the fact that the WHO is still conducting tests as the FBC or the friendliness of the facilities, production facilities out in Ural or wherever they are. Could not the UK adopt a similar tack as I believe it's 23 nations? I wouldn't say Europe, that's probably not right.
It's not right in Europe. No. So the question is, can the UK not recognise Sputnik V without WHO a listing? And
the WHO is looking for production and
sorry, the answer is, of course we could, but we are choosing not to. There is an international body that is open to all members, including Russia, to apply to have their vaccinations listed. It's listed a lot of vaccinations, and we will recognise all of those. I think you'll find that actually most of the bigger countries haven't recognised Sputnik for travel purposes, which is one of the reasons that we're all being lobbied by business associations. And I think all countries are making their own decisions about how to facilitate travel while also protecting their own citizens from COVID. And it's not a straightforward balance. I would also comment actually that Russia, I don't think, has recognised anyone else's vaccines, regardless of whether they are approved by the WHO or not. That won't be a factor for us because we're not doing this on a political level. But we are certainly talking to the Russian authorities about, as a start, they could recognise WHO approved vaccines. But thank you for your question. But we do have a very firm policy. Please go ahead.
I know about the pillars of the Russian climate strategy. There is a lot happening in the UK. Other
Thank you. Thank you. So the question is about plans for cooperation in the climate area, and the short answer is yes, there are, and those plans are being elaborated and becoming, they are growing all the time. I have 2 more meetings this week with the Russian government to talk about the kinds of things we might do together. But we're certainly looking at green finance, and we have various programs that will go into next year, encouraging the expansion of green finance in Russia. We're also looking at forestry, and in the margins of COP26, we had meetings between our forestry experts talking about how we could work together on forests. There's huge potential here to do more, and there's potentials around offsets and so on, which I think could be really important. So the answer is yes, but we are, that's work in progress. And my expectation is that fairly early in 2022, we'll have quite a lot more detail about what we're planning. But we've certainly got a range of things in the first quarter that I'm hoping that we will be able to build on. I mean, this remains a huge priority for the UK government, and we were very pleased with the outcome of COP26, but we absolutely recognise that now there's a job to maintain momentum, make sure that we all do all the things that we said that we would do in Glasgow, but we are also going to have to do more, and that's already clear. So there's a lot of planning for, and I'm hoping we will have some more senior visits and so on in the course of 2022 on this area, on climate. Thank you. Any other questions, or can I have? Oh, did you want to go on? I was going to hand over to Trevor, but that may be.
Okay, Trevor, do you want to
Very happy to try and answer any questions if anyone's got any. But we'll see. If not,
how does company help with services?
I mean, it varies obviously from company to company depending on what they want. So we probably haven't done so much. We've done some things on the ICT platforms, and we've done sort of regional events with Turkey. But for example, where we haven't done that with ICT, what we have done with legal services is put on various platforms for legal services companies to share expertise and to reach out. But equally, quite often what we do is more of a bespoke service. So we're very happy to have a separate chat with you. So for example, I don't want to commit the ambassador, but where we have done things would be events at the residence, where we've done things. I'm particularly keen, unfortunately not in our new bar yet, but I'm particularly keen when we start using this platform much more. So you can see for yourselves, this works very well when the IT is properly set up. So it's the type of thing where we would work with you to invite people in for you to do your presentation, but we provide the platform, if you see what I mean. And then with the facilities next door, we can then sort of take people around for social for social events afterwards. So that's very much bespoke. We do that very much for companies. Sometimes we just do a dinner, sometimes it's lunch, sometimes it's a big reception. So we will give them that support and that platform. I'm very happy to do so. But it's to a certain extent is how long is a piece of string, how far do people want us to go? I mean, some of that at the moment is chargeable, but we're actually looking at how we might adjust the methods there. And then for brand new companies, which is slightly different, it's often when they come to us just looking for some more general advice to start with. What about the market? What's the size? And then whether it's services or goods, depending on how far they want us to go with this, we will then help them research. So if they're looking for an agent or a distributor or a partner, we will then do the work. So particularly if you're, again, for people there, so if you're a British company who doesn't have Russian speakers, but you're looking to export, whether it's a good or a service, or you've got a particular, legal conveyancing offer that you think might be good for Russia, or an insurance offer that might be good for Russia, or an ICT offer that might be good for Russia, then we would try and help you identify partners. Slightly different in your case because you're well established, but for new to market companies, that's a lot of that sort of heavy lifting we will do for them. And the whole point of that being is that we want them to get from this step stage one to do there. And then certainly one of my main objectives with a lot of these companies is actually to get them to Russia and see for themselves, but on the basis that there's already a group of people who've said that they're interested in their product, and then we can help with arranging the meetings, and they can then actually meet real people and discuss real business issues. So I hope that answers. As I say, it varies. Yeah. Yeah, we've got a dedicated market access officer, and her entire role is looking for where barriers to trade are and what we can do to remove them. Obviously, sometimes our power to remove them is limited, but at least we can have a dialogue. And that's the type of thing where we would look to work with other chambers who've got the same issues, or the AEB, and collectively, come together. And I'll speak to my contacts and my colleagues in other embassies and say, is this a concern for your companies? And if they are, then we would perhaps do some joint lobbying or a joint letter, that type of thing, depending on whether we think there's going to be. And Russia just had in the WTO, it was just called the trade policy review, which happens every few years, depending on the market, where the international community, or certainly the international community that belongs to the WTO, sends in their questions, and Russia has to answer those questions in the same way we do. So if people have got concerns about our market, they can say, well, in the UK, we're not allowed to do this, why not? And we would have to answer those questions. And that's very much a WTO platform for doing that. And that's just happened with Russia. And there's the results haven't been published yet, but they will be, because under the WTO rules, once the questions have been answered, they publish the question that was asked, who asked it, and what the answer is, so that people can then decide themselves whether that's something they want to follow up on, or whether it answers the question, or whether they just reach a conclusion that's all going to be far too difficult.
Say, before you ask the question, welcome to Richard Nice, how do I say Karen? Here's the general update, but without putting on the spot, if there are any questions we now ask the Rbcc existing ambassador, and Sarah.
I'm really welcome, and thank you very much for the experience. So you mentioned that the current political agenda is quite problematic to users for teachers. So in your opinion, what could Russia do to change its public image on the international arena in order to foster cooperation in trade and economics, for instance, with regional players?
On the politics, I might let the ambassador answer on the politics. But yeah, sorry, the question was about what more could Russia do to sort of promote trade and business here. I'll let the ambassador answer on the political thing. The one thing I would say in terms of Russia promoting particularly the business environment is that we don't see very much from the Russian government in terms of what they do in the UK. So I've worked with, so I can give you a specific example, which was Malaysia, where I did a very similar job in Malaysia. When I worked in Malaysia, the Malaysian Development Agency was on the phone to us almost every day saying, we want to do an event, in Manchester or Glasgow, and they would pay for these events, but they needed our help to try and invite companies in, working through the British government network. So our trade officials in the different regions. It's very rare we get that request from the Russian Trade Office. So most of the events I think that I would be aware of to sort of, if you like, promote trade with Russia tend to be ones that the Rbcc have done in conjunction. So Ambassador Kellin's spoken at a few events, but normally ones that Rbcc have organised. So that would be specifically from my point of view, it would be, what are they doing? So we've got this event here today with the business community. I'm not aware that similar things are happening, with the Russian business community in the UK. So I think there's a lot more they could do on the promotional side, go around the country, not just in London. London seems to be the focus far too much, whereas a lot of the SME businesses and a lot of the supply chain businesses aren't in London, they're in the Midlands and the North. So it would be a case of, well, why don't you do an event? Why don't you, the Russian government or the Russian embassy, as we would do here in London, invite some of your own companies who've been, or British companies who've been successful in Russia? Why don't you set up an event, invite them to speak about their experiences? So you're hearing it direct from business to say, well, actually, I went to Russia and I was a bit nervous, but now my business is doing really well. It's putting on events and getting the word out that way. And I just don't think, unless I'm missing something else, that they do enough of that.
I'll just add that in the weekend, Russian trade. Fortunately, they're very short staff. They're very happy.
Politics, yeah.
So the question was, what can the Russian government do to improve the political situation? I'm not going to answer it directly because it would take a long time. But what I would do is cite two areas where businesses tell me hold them back from investing in Russia or engaging more in Russia. One of them is what we're seeing at the moment, the tensions around the Ukrainian border, and we saw that earlier in the year as well. What that does is it makes everyone very nervous, whether they're in Ukraine or Russia, or those looking at investing in either Ukraine or Russia, and it increases uncertainty and therefore it reduces interest and investment. The other area I would highlight that certainly, or what is most often raised with me, are issues such as the Bering Vostok and the arrest of Mike Calvi and the prosecution of those business people. That certainly before I came back to Russia in January 2020, that was an issue that was raised very frequently by business. That continues to be raised as an issue that increases concern. And when businesses are headquarters outside of Russia are thinking about whether to engage, it's a kind of issue that makes them hesitant and makes them look at other markets, despite the best efforts of Trevor and his team to point out, all the things that can be done here. Thank you. So I hand back to Trevor. Am I allowed to hand back to Trevor now? I bet all the
they don't look too hard actually. So okay, two questions from the online audience. One is straightforward. Can you run through what Russia now requires for entry with COVID in mind for UK travellers? And then a second one, will there be COVID booster jabs available for UK nationals in Russia?
Good afternoon, everybody. So on the first question, the entry rules to Russia, it's 72 hours before arrival, you need to have a negative PCR test. It's not confirmed as 48 yet. We're trying to get clarity on this. So at the moment, the travel advice states 72 hours and we're keeping it under review. We've got notes in with some of the MFA colleagues just to get clarity, because there seems to be some speculation about 72, 48. It's 48 to the UK at the moment, which could be what's causing some of the confusion. Strongly suggest that anybody that does travel frequently to the UK signs up to the travel advice pages on gov.uk, because at the moment they are being updated maybe 3-4 times a week. Also look at the gov.uk entry requirements for the UK, which are also changing at speed. And that is your best source of up-to-date information going in either direction. On the COVID boosters, it's a popular question at the moment. There is no plan to introduce COVID boosters to UK nationals overseas at the moment. We as diplomats are being advised to get our COVID boosters when we are next back in the UK. And that would be my advice to anybody that's travelling to the UK frequently. Get your COVID booster when you go back. So again, if there is a change to that information, it will be on the travel advice pages. Yep. Yeah. So I think, yeah, so apologies. The question was, you can get a Sputnik V booster in country quite easily. I think, as I understand the question to be, can you get a UK booster, which you can't at the moment in this country, and COVID V, and COVID V will not be recognised as a booster in the UK at the moment. We go back to the previous discussion on COVID vaccinations and what's recognised there. Yep.
is there any dialogue between the UK and Russia about possibility?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm going to get
So the short answer is, sorry, the question is there dialogue between the UK and Russia about the possibility of mutual recognition of vaccines? So we are talking to the Russian government actually about COVID more generally and about our rules, and that is ongoing. We are also actually planning an event in the first quarter of next year, a joint event on vaccines in order to actually encourage vaccination in Russia. But our policy remains, and we've explained our policy to the Russian government that, well, two things I would say. The Russian government, none of the Russian vaccines have made any application in the UK for registration. So you don't just recognise, you have to know something about the vaccine. You have to have the data. We don't have the data. In terms of travel, as I said, our policy is that we will recognise for travel purposes any vaccine that the WHO has included under its emergency listing. So that includes, I think it's 4 Chinese vaccines at the moment, or pretty much all the American ones, pretty much all the European ones, because they have gone to the WHO and received emergency listing. The Gamaleya Institute, the Russian government, has asked for emergency listing of Sputnik V. I think the WHO are waiting to do their next visit, and they're waiting for the Ministry of Health to tell them that they can come. And I'm not totally up to date, so it may be about to happen, but certainly the last time I checked it, it hadn't yet happened.
Comment. I read on the news that the State Duma is going to make legislation.
So I would just on, so the question, the statement was that there is a question about sort of recognition of other vaccines. I know that you're right, the Duma is looking at legislation that will make QR codes mandatory for entering quite a lot of public buildings. And I think in recognition of the importance of tourism and business travel, they are looking at whether they can recognise foreign vaccines, because at the moment in Russia it's just the Russian vaccines which are recognised, and obviously for Russian tourism and business purposes, I think that's why they're looking at expanding that list. Can I just be really clear though? I think you know COVID has been it's been difficult for all governments. We're all trying to get it right. We are all unfortunately maybe doing things in slightly different ways, but I'm conscious that for all of us who are trying to navigate this rather complex set of rules and regulations, which are changing a lot, and particularly for those of us, and of course this applies to all embassy staff who travel a lot and you know who have family and friends in different countries, it's been a really taxing period. So just for all of you who are struggling with this, you know, we share this experience with you, and we are keen to get it right. But it is something that I think all governments are sort of working their way through. So I have to say my NHS pass was also accepted in all sorts of places in Russia. Of course, in the UK we don't have QR codes. Sorry, we don't have QR codes in England. I think we do have them. If you want to go night clubbing in Wales, I think you need a QR code. But for the most part, we don't have the same sort of restrictions that they have in some other countries, and obviously some, France, Germany, have very strict QR code rules. Is that the end of the questions? I think so. Yeah. Can I just say then it's really great again to have you here. So thank you all for coming. You know, obviously if Alf wants to do it again, I think we will. We would like to do it again if you are all engaged, and we are hoping that we can over time in a careful and safe way do more and more in-person events, because we have missed you. And so thank you, Rbcc.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of comments. Nathan and I on Friday were at a press conference convened by ourselves and other business associations about the very question of recognizing each other's vaccinations. We appreciate it's outside of the government sort of how they view the issue, but we thought it important to raise it for our members because we know it's at the top of their concerns. Also, I'm slightly concerned at the amount of people who are foreigners working in Russia on a work visa, be it HQS or other variants of that, who are here and are unaware of the change to the medical testing requirement, which is going to be quite onerous as it is. Again, Nathan, myself, and other business organizations have been aware of this for 3 or 4 months now, and we've been lobbying on it. And I know there's the AEB are in the lead for it, and I know they have a meeting today at the MVD to try and clarify some of the detail. But at the moment, foreigners will be required to do medical examinations, including blood and x-rays and all that every 3 months. So quite an onerous imposition, and one to be aware of. I'm pretty confident that will change, but that's how the law stands at the moment. And depending on what, there are slight nuances to it, but this comes into effect either the 31st of October or the 29th of December, depending on what visa you're here on. So on that happy note, I will finish. Thank you very much for attending today. A huge vote of thanks to Ambassador, to Trevor, and to Sarah for fielding the questions. Not all difficult, but some a little bit tricky. And please do stay now. We're now going to move out of this room to the left to the bar, where we'll enjoy a drink and hopefully get to know each other a little bit better. Okay, thank you very much. Good.
Yeah.